Hello, and welcome to my podcast entitled The Wright Experience. I'm Dr. William T. Wright Jr., the founder and host of this show. I'm now in the midst of my ninth school year as superintendent of schools and my 24th in public education. Over those years, I've been fortunate enough to get to work with and learn and get to know some amazing leaders from all across the United States. The vision of this show is and has been to share these podcasts with you so that we can learn from others and get better every day. Thank you so much to all of you for continuing to watch this show. I've been absolutely pleased with the outcome and the output, and I want you to continue to share this with others and spread the word. That helps me tremendously. When you hear something that you like, please click like, comment, let us know what you're thinking and enjoying about our show. Also, in addition to that, if you're viewing us via YouTube, I'd ask that you comment, click like, and most importantly, please click that subscribe button. That helps me with the podcast. In my travels, I've been absolutely amazed hearing the wonderful comments and praise for the show that we've been able to produce thus far. Tonight is episode 25 of the Wright Experience. My guest tonight is a veteran education professional at the higher education level. He has served at the university and community college level at progressively responsible positions. He's also involved himself in several ventures, which we'll hear about tonight, aimed at the mentorship of African American males in particular. I met him several years ago when he aspired to be a member of the prestigious Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Today, I'm proud to call him my brother as well as my friend. My guest tonight is Mr. Jasmin Spain. Jasmin L. Spain is a native of Gaston, North Carolina. He holds a bachelor's degree from North Carolina Wesleyan College in exercise science and a master's degree from North Carolina State University in counselor education with a concentration in student personnel and higher education. During his first few years after completing his studies, he served in the area of public health, working with faith-based communities on healthy sexual behavior amongst youth and tobacco prevention and cessation. Mr. Spain has almost 24 years of higher education experience, serving 4 years at the college university level and the last 12 in the community college sector, currently serving as the Assistant Vice President of Student Support at Pitt Community College in Whiteville, North Carolina. While at PCC, he has served in dual roles with the Offices of Student Development Services as well as Institutional Advancement. In his current position, he also provides vision and leadership to the areas of student conduct, Title IX, threat assessment, minority male and men's resource initiatives, TRIO, counseling, accessibility, diversity and inclusion related efforts, implementation of student mentoring and leadership initiatives, workforce development and student engagement and leadership. And I just learned a few minutes ago, he's also the COVID contact for Pitt Community College. In addition to that, Mr. Spain serves on advisory boards for the North Carolina Community College Systems Minority Male Success Initiative, Student Conduct, and Title IX and First Generation. The NCCCS is composed of 58 community colleges within the state of North Carolina. He has many research interests, and his experience primarily lies in working with students who mainly have been labeled as at risk from low socioeconomic backgrounds, including poverty, poor educational systems, high crime rates, and most notably being first-generation college students. Mr. Spain is recognized by the NISOD, which is the National Institute for Staff and Organization Development, as a master presenter. Mr. Spain is also the founder and chief visionary officer of the MAIN Initiatives, which stands for Males Addressing Issues and Needs. He is also the founder and president of You Good Bro. You Good Bro is the world's greatest solution-focused nonprofit entity designed to provide a private, safe space for transparency, vulnerability, and liberation. He is the son of Kirby and Shondelyn Spain and George and Helen Reed. He has two sisters, one brother who have given him four amazing nieces and three nephews. He's also the product of growing up in a single-parent home covered by a praying and God-fearing mother who raised him to believe and trust God and to pray that his will be done in his life. At this time, I am absolutely pleased to present my friend and brother, Jasmin Spain. How you doing?
Doing good, brother Wright. If you don't mind, if I call you brother Wright as opposed to Doctor Wright this evening.
That'll be fine. That'll be fine. That'll be fine. This show has afforded me the opportunity to be called some different names because of the way that people know me. So that's fine.
All right.
Certainly glad to have you here tonight. Very timely. We got a lot of stuff going on, even in my local district right now. So it's amazing how the timing worked out for you to be on the show at this time. But anyway, let's start right into the questions. As stated in your biography, you are currently serving in a leadership role at Pitt Community College as the Assistant Vice President of Student Support. So talk to us a little bit about your daily responsibilities at PCC.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity, brother Wright, for me to be on the show. Um, to answer your question, it's the best way to explain that would say everything outside the classroom that gives students an opportunity to be successful. Student advocacy is the number one priority for me. Ensuring that students receive all of the services, whether it's counseling services for my students that have disabilities, or I'll say and I would say abled. I will say able students because I want to make sure that I speak from a positive lens and a growth mindset as opposed to a deficit mindset. Um, Students who are first generation low income, as we stated before, but also students that receive due process. Just like I know, when it comes to student discipline or grievances, students want to make sure that they receive the necessary get the process and due process to make sure that they're heard, that there's a fair process. When we talk about equity, making sure it's an equitable process. So that's a part of my priorities day in and day out, along with, ensuring that within the community college, we talk about degree attainment, but we also talk about workforce development. There are a lot of students who come to college who not necessarily have a desire to transfer or to obtain an associate's degree. Some of them are the first in their family to go to college, and for some of them, they have to be the breadwinner at the house. And so, with that being said, a lot of times that, hey, they only want to enroll in a 6-month program. Come in, get me a credential, let me step out and go to work. So I oversee that area, but also that is in alignment with our career services area to help prepare students for the workforce. And that includes job certification, mock interviews, professional dress, providing internships. So, just trying to have a total holistic approach. That is pretty much my responsibilities. Just trying to help cultivate students, but provide advocacy because it's not students that are not able to be academically successful in the classroom. It's everything that goes on the outside that prevents them from being able to be focused when they come into the classroom. So that's
Outstanding, outstanding. And
yes,
you've
sir.
been doing that now in that role for how many years?
Five,
5 years. 5 years.
5 year. Yes, sir.
Outstanding. Mr. Spain, you've also ventured and founded a couple of organizations directly aimed at mentoring African American males. Tell us about that work and what inspired you to venture into that realm.
Yeah, brother, right. When I met you, I had transferred to North Carolina Wesleyan. I started out at University of North Carolina at Greensboro, and my lack of college readiness, but also some of the experiences I had coming out of Northampton County, Gaston, North Carolina, to be exact. Um, those were some things that were pretty traumatic, and at that time, you don't think they're traumatic during that time, and during those moments, when I arrived at North Carolina, I mean at UNC Greensboro, I was not prepared. I wasn't prepared academically. I wasn't prepared as a mature young man, but also I was still finding my way as a black male on a predominantly white campus. Because of all of those different factors, I was actually dismissed from the institution. And so North Carolina Wesleyan College gave me an opportunity, to kind of build some level of resilience. And so when I arrived, my whole shift, I had to make a shift. My focus changed. And so one of them was becoming a member of Alpha Phi Alpha. And during that time, observing leaders like yourself who gave me a blueprint of what success actually looked like. Um, and so following that lead, it allowed me to not only get involved on campus as a member of Alpha, it also gave me an opportunity to be a member of SGA, do some work study, which allowed me to begin having some level of leadership outside of just being a part of clubs and organizations, but actually being able to help support different departments on campus. But I also realized when I was there that there were other brothers that were enrolled at the institution who had some of the same experiences that I had. And there was really, no mentorship at the institution. And as a brother that was enrolled at the institution trying to be a student leader, it only goes but so far, because you can touch some brothers, but for a lot of brothers, man, they don't see uh, brothers from a positive light as being cool, especially at the institution. And I'm not downgrading, North Carolina Wesleyan College at all. I want to be very frank about that to all our audience and our listeners, because I believe it's a dynamic institution. However, the culture at that time didn't promote um, academic success. Um, and it did not promote the development of the black male on that campus. And with that challenge, you kind of find yourself in a cocoon. I know for myself it did. Fast forward, I graduated from the institution and I returned back after doing 3 years in public health. And I was asked to be involved in the residence life department. My first job at the college, I oversaw a freshman hall of nothing but basketball and football players. So you imagine football and basketball players freshman year in a dorm room, in a dorm. Man, it was something else. But I will say during that time, when you go to a college campus, it's one thing when you have these brothers going in and out of the classroom. But when the sun goes down and life really hits, you find out what's going on with some of these brothers, especially brothers who come to the institution. Yeah, they may come to play sports and possibly get an education, but what the college did provide them with is a safe space from whatever it is that they were encountering at home, whether it was some sort of violence, drugs, whatever, peer pressure. They also had an opportunity to get 3 meals a day. A lot of brothers who didn't have that opportunity when they were coming from home. And then they also had structure. Some of them didn't have never experienced structure a day in their life. So for a lot of them, it was a big change. But I also realized that there were brothers having the same issues that I had about 8 to 10 years prior. So when that happened, I had to create a system. I had to create a culture, a box almost, a safe space for them to come into this environment and be themselves. First, trying to build trust with these young brothers, but allowing them the opportunity to just share, talk about the challenges that they have encountered prior to the institution, their ability to adjust, how they feel the institution is providing a sense of belonging and acceptance, especially coming from, again, at that institution, it's a predominantly white campus affiliated with the Methodist Church. So you have some challenges in the acclimation of a black male on that college campus. And so that's when I started the main initiative. Now, the goal originally was to create a success model for black males in higher ed. Well, as time went on, it started to expand, brother. Right? You started going from just a success model to providing safe spaces for conversation with brothers, but then also helping to establish black male initiatives on college campuses. So and then, for over the last 4 or 5 years, I've been able to do a lot of consultation in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this was prior to COVID. Everybody's on the DEI bandwagon right about now. But prior to that, we're having these conversations already. And so taking a look at all of those different factors, man, that's where the main initiative comes from. So at this present moment, again, it's providing professional development, consultation for DEI services, helping to establish Black male initiatives where it's in the school systems, especially on college campuses. Um, but also, just ensuring that we can create an environment for um, cities, counties, schools, churches, etc., to have a clear understanding that Black men and boys are important, and that we have to do everything possible to support those brothers. Now, my second organization is a nonprofit entity, like you shared. It's called You Good Bro. You Good Bro is a very I'm going to use the language of raw, very intentional, solution focused, but it's a space for brothers to say that they're not okay. Okay. And to tell them that it's okay for you to say you're not okay. And we're talking about self-care. We're talking about brothers who are dealing with relationship issues, whether it's with their lack of fathers in the home, whether it's with their spouses, whether it's with one another as men, but also breaking down those barriers of understanding that we as men, especially Black men, have emotion. We have emotion in the fact of how do we show that emotion in a healthy manner, as opposed to what we're taught to be aggressive, to withhold emotion, and that it's appropriate, or it's accepted emotion if we lash out in anger and violence, whether it's physical abuse, verbal abuse, or even emotional abuse. And so, there's some very raw space for brothers to actually share their experiences and to be in a non-judgmental space. We're very, very intentional about being non-judgmental, because it takes a while for a man to expose himself, to be vulnerable.
Sure.
For a brother to say, I'm hurting, like, brother, you hurt my feelings. Other than the fact that you pissed me off. It's the same thing, but you hurt my feelings to a man may sound more of a feminine statement. You know what I mean? When in the real all reality, it's the same thing. So we talk about that, and we also hold one another accountable, because you can't come to the table saying these are the issues that I'm having, or these are some of the challenges I'm encountering, and we can't, and we not have a conversation about what the solution is. And so we're very intentional about accountability, but also to speak your truth. If you're encountering some challenges, man, let's talk about it. And it's not all about negative challenges. Prior to you and I getting on this call, just talking about just success. You know what I mean? How does a brother deal with success?
Right.
um, and so those are some of the conversations that we engage in. And so um, just very intentional about the growth and the healthy development, holistic development, and the healthy development of Black males.
And certainly in today's time, with all of the stress of social emotional life in
Mhm.
general,
That's right.
we need that. We need those outlets. So that's awesome work that you're doing.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Spain, there seems to be a large disconnect. That's the word I'll use on here. Uh, Currently, between the African American male in particular and the rest of the nation. Why do you believe that is, and what can we do about it?
Uh, Man,
Or do you
that's that,
believe
that,
that's the case, first of all?
I think it's a lot that we can do about it. But I
Okay.
think one of the things we need to do is we need to accept our country's history. All right.
Sure.
Um, because our history is as especially as Black, as African Americans, it has not been the best. It's for downright traumatic for a lot of folks. I'm 40 years old. My mother is not too far removed from the civil rights movement. Her mother is not too far removed from, being told, to call it, still calling them boy,
Sure.
still getting lashed out on. I remember hearing my great grandmother talk about how Master Spain used to rape her daily, and that's exactly how my grandmother came about. Um, and I think that just understanding that, the history of America. Fast forward, you talking about the dehumanization of Black men. All right, and the history of how Black men and the torture of Black men was used to to suppress black men, how it traumatized the minds of black mothers, and to almost, to train their black sons to stay in line. And so you factor that in. You go into the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, where black men are, the challenges of trusting medical professionals, and then you transition and you come down and you start to see um, black on black, not black, well, say issues with law enforcement or the inequities or the injustice that's caused to black men. You start
Sure.
looking at videos of Rodney King. I remember being in high school, man. I remember in high school seeing those videos, and you sit there and wonder that, why did this happen? And you're thinking about just because of the color of a man's skin, and you start, coming to the realization of, just how, just looking at the history, bro, right? I mean, of how black men have been treated in this country. And there are a number of reports, researches out there about if you can withhold the success of black men, you could darn near withhold the success of an entire race. And I do believe that that has been, over time, has been something that has been implemented. But I also think that over time, this is a fight that folks have been aware of and that folks needed to get involved in. Because let's be honest, I mean, we deal with young folks, we deal with education. And we've been tasked to educate these folks, educate these young men to be, not just educated, but understanding the value of getting an education, which leads to being financially stable. When you talk about being financially stable, you're talking about decreasing the crime rate. You decrease the crime rate. I mean, you're changing the whole trajectory in a culture. And so, what I believe is that taking a very clear assessment of what our history has said, taking ownership of what we've encountered, but also asking ourselves, not necessarily having the conversation of what can we do, it's what can we implement into action that can be
Sure.
done.
Right.
We have a lot of conversations about this, especially black males and their disconnect in higher education. And I've encountered, some of the same conversations in the K-12 sector. And a lot of young brothers are just being misunderstood, and all of us ain't the same. All of us are not the same. A lot of us have the desire to be educated, have a desire to go to school, have a desire to have a family, and be able to provide. But we also got to understand that there's a lot that comes with being a black male, walking into the classroom. Black male can't just walk in your classroom, bro, right, and leave his backpack at home. You know what I mean? So when he comes in with his backpack, he got to bring everything with him. So you got a black male coming into your classroom. He's bringing everything with him. He's bringing what's going on at the house, what's going on with his parents, whether or not he is eating, whether or not, he, when he leaves here, the pressures of going home from his peers. I mean, there's a multitude of things, but right. And I believe it can be done, but we have to work together. We have to work together. And in order for us to work together, we have to embrace and agree that, you know, um, our young men have been dealt a bad hand. And so
Sure.
in order for us to change that, we have to work together and get this done.
Yeah, and I got asked by a lot of my friends and colleagues, what do we do, especially during the height of the George Floyd era. And one of the things that I kind of pinned and put on Twitter and wherever is, the biggest thing that we all can do is when we see injustice, don't ignore it.
Right.
Don't ignore it.
That's right.
And so, anyway, the field of education, Mr. Spain, seems to have a small number of African American males that remain in the profession.
Hmm.
What needs to be done differently, in your opinion, to attract and retain more of us?
Yeah. Let's be honest, bro. Right. Just as institutions and schools are very strategic about recruiting folks, we need to be strategic and intentional about recruiting black males in education.
Okay.
There's that quote, they can't be what they can't see. Well, if that's the case, then why don't we provide? Why don't we show and prove? Why don't we put the resources that are necessary for us to not only be recruited, but to be, for us to appreciate being recruited, but then also once we arrive, being able to receive the resources that's required for us to stay there. I think that a lot of times we sit back and serve on search committees, or don't. Let me go. Okay, let's go from a human resource standpoint. And when I
Okay.
say human resource standpoint, let's go from a search committee. You've been tasked to lead a search to bring in a math teacher. Okay, when you look at the performance of black males in math at your school, it's obvious that there we need somebody qualified who could reach these young men. Well, ideally, well, I say ideally, it would not hurt for you to be intentional about marketing and crafting strategically how that job description is written. Okay, you also have an opportunity to have a seat at the table to speak to those things. So when you talk about if we see some injustice, we need to say something. Well,
Okay.
when we see that there's a problem, we need to say something.
Sure.
So we need to be vocal in our advocacy of wanting to see our students succeed. And I've encountered a lot of heat about saying that I put too much emphasis on the success of black males. But I will tell you this much. When I look at the statistics, black males sit at the bottom academically in regards to academic success.
Sure.
If those numbers increase, the entire success rate of the institution increases. And so I say that to say, when you have the opportunity to put the resources in front of these young brothers to be successful, then it will not only change the trajectory of this young man as an individual, but if even if the institution is only looking at it from numbers, well, then the institutional numbers and the success rates will go up as well. So I guess, to answer your question, I think we should be intentional about going out to identify some solid, quality, qualified black men in the classroom. As far as retaining them, as someone who works in the realm of diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Hmm.
one of the conversations we need to have is about when we get folks in that door, we need to pay them just like we pay everybody else. You know, let's. I mean, we if we want people to stay and we want to see effective change, there are young men. I mean, there are people who sit in these positions who pour into students day in and day out. And when you're talking about pouring into some black males, I mean, you're talking about this conversation doesn't stop talking to this young man at 3 o'clock when the bell rings and they go get on the bus. This might be a text message in the afternoon saying, "Brother Wright, I ain't ate dinner today. How can I get something to eat? I may not have a ride to school in the morning because my mom and dad got into a fight. We only got one car. My daddy took the car, and so I don't know how I'm gonna get to school. You start having those kind of conversations, man, and um, it's to me, you're just gonna have to step your game up. We have to step our game up and pay folks, what they're due. You know, so
Very good.
yeah.
All right. All right. And so, what about higher education leaders? What advice would you give to folks that are aspiring to be higher ed leaders?
Um, I think that the advice I would give them is to let them know that that's a good question. I've never been asked that question, brother. Right? Except for those, that's now for those aspiring to be higher education leaders with the sole intent and purpose of serving in this sector. That you know don't get caught up in thinking that this is it's all cookies and milk. Let's put it that way. Because most when they think about higher education, they think about it's an institution where everybody that enrolls is seeking to get a college degree to in hopes of bettering themselves, um, and to quote unquote get a good job when they get out. Okay. And I'm just being very transparent. And that's not always the case. When you walk into the doors on a college campus, it's only a step up from what they just expressed when they come out of K-12. Higher education has changed over the years. You know, when higher education came about, and I won't go into the details of PWIs, HBCUs, discrimination, segregation, etc. I won't go into that. But what I will go into is that the game has changed. Originally for higher education, administrators or just someone who may want to serve in the classroom, that was the case. That was the case that you had folks who had a desire for a degree attainment to further their to push along, to be able to provide financially, to be a pillar for the institution, to shuffle along. But over time, there also has been a shift of the student, the quality of student, and the type of student that walk through those doors. And when that happened, that's when there started to be a bit of a divide. But right, let me go a little deeper on this. Um, when that occurred, you started to have an influx of those who may be financially challenged, um, college readiness challenged, etc. So when you do that, you on one end you open up the doors for the opportunity for those to come along and to obtain an education, but also you have to be able to provide the resources and the support structure around for those folks to be educated. And not have any challenges. So I say all that to say is that if you're going into higher education, you need to understand this is just not a cake job. You know, you're walking into an environment where these students have challenges. These students are seeking to get an education, but these students, there's an additional challenge that goes on to it where you have to make sure that those students have the right resources in place. And so I'll just say, some advice is that this is not a cake job. It's not a pie job, man. And a lot of folks really think that. You talk to a lot of folks, they say, I want to get on the college campus. I want to get on the college campus. It seems like it's just the greatest thing to be. Until you come experience the college campus, you might change your mind. So it takes a special type of individual to walk into a institution of higher education, and to be able to deal with the pressures of the institution as well as the pressures that come from student success. So yeah.
So we could talk all night. I've got one last question I want to get to because
Right.
I think this is a pretty good one. What are the biggest lessons that you have learned over your career that you think might be helpful to those in our profession, or you even doing mentoring work like you're doing?
Yeah, that's a good question, bro. Right. My biggest, what I would say is, don't box yourself in. There's a
Right.
number of different things to get involved in. Your position may be, like I use myself for an example. It may be being an assistant vice president of student support. Now, I talked about the different areas that I provide oversight and leadership for, but it doesn't mean that I can't be a part of our foundation and help support them in fundraising events and fundraising efforts. By me doing that, what that does is it gives me an additional network outside of the institution where I have an opportunity to meet with sponsors and donors. These folks provide financial resources. And because of that, that also means that they have a certain level of status in the community. And there's nothing wrong with being connected with those individuals, because there may be times when you may be working in a mentorship program like myself, where I can go to them for resources because they're aware of the work that I do at the institution, and because I've built that rapport. It doesn't stop me from being able to go over to the academic affairs side and say, hey, I'll teach one of your freshman orientation courses. That gives me an opportunity to build relationship with our incoming students in the classroom, although predominantly my work goes on outside of the classroom. But also, when I get into that classroom, it gives me an opportunity to take a look at how students are being served. It gives me another seat at another table when ideally I would not. And so, when you have those type of experiences, you also build a resume that's holistic. So you have an opportunity to have those transferable skills that we talk about, to be able to sit in different pockets and speak to different areas, which make you a bit more, I don't say respectable, but you're much more knowledgeable. And it gives you a seat at the table where, in some cases, you would not have an opportunity to be in. So I would not box myself in at all That's one thing I would share with leaders. Do not box yourself in at all by just a position. You know, I think that leadership is a big part of it is influence and and getting involved in ways that are not conventional. You know, so yeah.
I had someone that so reminds me of an answer I gave to someone who was asking me about my success and how did you get to be successful, and I just look at it as the work I do more so than measuring success. But anyway,
Right.
but what I said to them is something very similar to what you said. I said, well, if anything, I think it's because I've always been able to and sought to go above and beyond, to committed to the work that I was doing. So
Yes.
I
It's
think
what they say, bro. Right. It's not hard work. It's hard work.
that's right. That's
That's
exactly
right.
right. That's exactly right. Well, is there anything else that I've not covered that you can think of that we might need to discuss tonight, Mr. Spain, at this point?
No, I would just like to encourage, leaders out there that work with black males or see black males in the classrooms or interact with them often, is that if you don't have a mentor program, uh,
Mhm.
try to work to establish one. Um, I think success has so many different facets, but I think that you made mention of the social, psychosocial, emotional aspect of things.
Right.
Being able to create a culture to address those matters, and you'll see significant change in attitudes, behaviors, their level of emotional intelligence, but also their success in the classroom. And so I just like to highly encourage leaders out there to create those mentorship programs. I know that there are some schools that have certain periods within the school day that is dedicated to clubs, organizations, extracurricular time. And there's nothing wrong with creating a mentorship program during that time. I was able to actually create a mentorship program with one of the local middle schools for Black boys. And essentially what I did was just turned it into a chess club. You
Right.
know, these young brothers didn't know how to play chess, taught them how to play chess, but also associated and connected them with chess and life and how they work together and how they, mirror one another. So um, I'm open to any conversation any leaders have, to help establish mentorship programs or to just have a phone call and just kind of talk about it, and the impact of them. So,
Outstanding. Outstanding. Hold on with me just a minute. We'll come right back and close out the show.
all right.
My guest next week will be the newly minted Dr. Tanya Turner, who is the superintendent of Perquimans County Schools in North Carolina. Dr. Turner is what we would call a rising star in our profession. I look forward to that experience, and that's going to be next Thursday, September 2nd at 7 o'clock p.m. Mr. Spain, Brother Spain, um,
Mhm.
my brother, I'm extremely proud of you and all the work that you're doing, all the way from the aspiring Sphinxman days until now.
Yes, sir.
But you've done really well, and keep on doing the wonderful work that you're doing to make life better for our young folks. Like I said, every time I read something about some of the work that you're doing, or get an opportunity to when you share information with me about what you're doing, I'm just extremely proud of you and thankful that you agreed to come on and be a part of this show. I feel like our viewers, as they have with the 24 guests now that preceded you, I also believe that they learned a lot tonight. And so thank you for your work, and we'll look to have you back on the show at a later date.
Definitely, big brother. Thank you so much.
All right. And thank you all tonight for watching The Wright Experience. Have a good evening.